character development, probably go to a different show. But if you just love what shonen has to offer as a genre, like this is literally just kind of like the epitome of shonen, just like distilled down into its finest form. I mean, maybe not finest form, but yeah, really good form. Hello and welcome to Add It to the List, the show where we binge watch a season of an anime and then talk about whether it should go on your watch list. I'm Forrest, and with me as always is Jack here.
What's good?
Beware spoilers for this week's season of anime, which is One Punch Man. Jack, what was your first knowledge of One Punch Man?
I had never consumed it myself in any of its forms because I just didn't want to be bothered with keeping up with something as it was coming out. And then as it was coming out, everybody just sort of talking about how it's the prophesied return of good anime and like how it was God's gift to every anime watcher just sort of really put me off. And then the few people who I did know at that time who watched anime, they summarized it honestly pretty poorly and in a way that made it much less interesting than what I now know it to be.
That is very interesting.
How about you?
I mean, I had a completely different situation with this anime. I started watching it, like, I think 2 to 3 episodes into it coming out. And I just kind of like decided I wanted to watch it. I had heard about One Punch Man for a while, and then I honestly don't even know where I saw that it was getting an anime adaptation. But then I randomly saw that it was airing back in like 2017, I think is when it came out. Or wow, 2015 actually. Holy crap. Yeah, so I was just like, yeah, I'll watch it. And I mean, I loved it, but I also didn't have any preconceived notions going into it. I literally knew nothing about it. And honestly, it was like so early in my anime watching that it was just kind of very, very sentimental to me, I guess.
You know what I just realized? If it was coming out in 2015, then that was definitely when I was in charge of the after-school program that I worked for's anime club, which almost definitely explains why everything that I heard about it made it sound bad because it was being described to me by like 14-year-olds.
I mean, like, we don't have to get into this, but what were some of the descriptions that people gave you?
I don't even really remember. All that I remember is the general vibe, and it was always about like, oh my god, it's a departure from all of like the dumb stuff that anime's been doing recently. It's like a real throwback to when anime was anime. It was along the same lines as that like 50-year-old man that goes, oh, do you remember when men were allowed to be men? Right? Like, it was very much like do you remember when anime was allowed to be anime? And it's like, you don't. You're 14. But also, that wasn't good times. There's a lot of trash anime in the 90s. There's a lot of trash anime now.
That's such an interesting perspective, because for me, you know, I was like, I had seen Dragon Ball at that point, I think, so like, I was just kind of like, yeah, cool, anime, and I knew that it was supposed to be a parody, which it is, of shonen, so it's like, I never really held it to that high regard. I was just like, yeah, this is a fun show. I enjoyed watching that, you know, which, yeah, we'll get into, but first...
For what it's worth, I do want to say that it's not like I've been avoiding it since then. I was just like, sure, whatever. I've got a lot that I got to do. Like, I was in college at that point and, like, working a couple of jobs. And there was a lot of anime coming out. And there was, like, stuff that I wanted to read and all of that. So it's not like I was avoiding it because of those reasons. But at the same time, something that I'm delightfully appreciative of is that this is by no means the comedy anime that people say it to be, which is to say that it is a comedy anime, but in a very different way. it's not like jokes like say Gintama, where it's so culturally based and so timing based that watching the sub can sometimes just kill the joke because you read faster than they speak, or you read a little bit slower than they speak, or like you're just not consuming the visual of it while it's being like given to you, and so the joke kind of like fizzles as a result. It's like the comedy is understated except for when it's the point, and I think it lands enough.
Yeah, definitely. I was gonna say that like I feel like a lot of the comedy is very situational too. Like instead of like just outright spoken jokes, it's like mostly like how is this situation that the main character is in funny, you know? And I enjoy that type of humor. But yeah, I'm gonna go into a little brief synopsis, which I mean like is incredibly brief because for those who don't know, this story is about a hero named Saitama, and he is the One Punch Man of the title. Essentially, he's so strong that no one he fights even stands a chance. He just punches them once and they're dead. And he always says that he's just a hero for fun. Yeah, basically, with the first episode, we get introduced to Saitama as a character. We kind of just see what he does in his day to day life. Like the very first scene is him saving a child from basically a purple piccolo, which I mean,
An
like,
egregiously just a purple Piccolo. It is Dragon Ball Piccolo, but he's purple and he's got little like safety tennis balls at the end of his antenna.
and his name is Vaccine Man.
Yeah, because humanity is a plague on the earth, and Mother Earth birthed me to do to stop you. It's a very good example of the ways in which this show is funny, because it's like, oh, this is like a traditional shonen. The villain's going to monologue, and then there's going to be this big fight. The villain starts monologuing, and Saitama just doesn't care. And then all of a sudden, he's like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean that is basically this story to a T. And honestly, like I don't really know if there's such thing as spoilers for this show. I mean, like if you've seen the show, you've seen it, but you get the gist of what the story is about. Saitama always shows up at the end, and he beats the big bad with one punch, and I mean, that's all you need to know, really. So I don't know. I mean, we'll get into like really deep spoilers and like specifics on like certain events and stuff later on, but I think we are going to go through these episodes one at a time and like just give a general rundown of the plot.
Spoilers alert for like my review of this show is a lot of it just sort of goes by as visual noise. Either sometime in this episode or in episode 2, we watch like a flashback of his like superhero origin story, and by his I mean Saitama. We don't. Vaccine Man explodes violently. It's also worth noting, trigger warning for aggressively over the top viscera. Like, it's done in a comedic way, but if blood's a thing for you, then this is not the show for you. It's not all the time, and it's not like a berserk thing, but people explode and have, like, holes punched through their chest and all that, so, like,
Yeah.
you know.
I completely forgot about the trigger warnings, but there they are. I mean, I believe is it in the first episode where he faces that giant guy that's like walking through the city with his brother?
It's either episode 1 or episode 1 and episode 2 are very much like,
They're just like
I
introductory
think it's
episodes.
episode 1 because episode 2 is the horny mosquito lady.
Oh yeah, and that's where you get introduced to Genos. But yeah, I mean the first episode is specifically just kind of meant to introduce you to Saitama, and his plight, I guess you could say, is that he's just gotten so bored because he's too strong. And that's kind of a running theme throughout the show, obviously. But I mean, I do genuinely think it's a very like dark comedy scene, but like there's this brief story about this scientist whose brother is like training super hard to become like the strongest man, and then his brother, who's a scientist, is like, I did it, I created a drug that'll just turn you into the strongest being in the world. And then he like turns into a giant, and then they just start walking through a city and killing a bunch of people. And then like Saitama shows up, lands on the guy's shoulder, and is like, it sucks to be really strong, doesn't it? And then his brother, who is on the opposite shoulder from Saitama, is like, hit that guy that's on your shoulder. And then he just crushes his own brother. And then he's like, oh, why did I become so strong? Because I literally just ruined everything. And then Saitama just like one punches him. But
he does the thing. He did the thing.
Yeah.
He said the thing.
And that's kind of just like how this first episode goes. Just kind of giving you a sense for what Saitama is going through. And I think it's in this, is this episode where you see like him fight the Crab Man too, I think?
I think so.
This all just like blurs together.
It's not, like I said, nothing's really distinct enough to like stand out.
Well, it's like I remember these encounters. It's just hard for me to remember specifically what episode they happened in. And I'm pretty sure this is all the first episode, because this kind of shows Saitama's first encounter with a monster. And it's just like this crab man who I guess just hates people. And Saitama shows up and then is trying to protect a kid randomly. What were you going to say?
So this is Saitama's origin, and what it is there's this guy who ate so much crab that the upper half of his body turned into like crab armor plating, and he's like a crab furry walking around, but from the waist down he's still a dude, so he's got like whitey tighties and like just bare ass legs. And basically what he ends up telling you is that anybody who makes fun of how I look, I just smush them with my crab claws. Turns out there's this kid who drew nipples on his crab chest, and he's like, all right, I'm gonna go kill that kid. And Saitama, who at this point has hair, runs into the crab guy, and the crab guy goes, oh, why aren't you running away from me? And Saitama just doesn't care. He's an unemployed salary man, I think is the implication. And they talk about how he's job hunting, and then the crab guy goes, oh, you're dead in your eyes, just like I'm dead behind my eyes. So from one pair of dead eyes to another, I'll let you live today.
Yeah. And then Saitama just like randomly stumbles upon the kid that just so happened to draw those nipples on the crab man, because the crab man was like, the kid had a butt chin, like a really big butt chin. And then Saitama's like, oh, this is that kid. And then the crab man shows up, and Saitama's kind of like, oh, what am I going to do in this situation? And then he ends up rescuing the kid, and then, you know, the crab man's like, I let you live. Why are you doing this? I'm going to kill you now. And then Saitama just kind of gets smacked against the wall. Like, at this point, he has no powers. He's just a normal dude. But then he leaps over the crab man with his tie and just, like, yanks his eyeball out. And that's pretty gruesome scene.
And all of his organs come aggressively rushing out of his eye.
Yeah. And that's kind of that whole sequence. And that's supposed to be, like, the point where Saitama decided he wanted to help people. And it's supposed to be the point where he, like, decided to start training. And then I think that pretty much ends that first episode.
It either ends the first episode or it starts the second, and I'll be damned if I can remember.
Yeah. And then the second episode, we get introduced to the other main character of the story, a cyborg named Genos, who... I mean, I love Genos just because he's my type. He's just a fight boy.
Those tall, dark, and broody emo blonde boys?
I guess.
Because even if you haven't seen this show, you've seen Genos.
Yeah.
If you were around any anime-related fan content in 2016, you've seen Genos.
I mean, I love the fact that Genos is kind of played as this character that like knows how strong Saitama is, but like also takes Saitama so seriously. Like he's like, yes, this man is the strongest being that has ever lived. I will follow him to my death, and like I will take notes about everything that he's doing, no matter what it is. Like, and Saitama doesn't really show much care back towards him at first, you know, and so like it's just a good dynamic.
Yeah. So in this episode, the villain of episode 2 is Big Horny Mosquito Lady, who there's not too terrible much to say about her, except she has the line, "Empty your juices into me."
Yeah.
She's talking to her mosquito children, which make it even weirder. I don't like it. No me gusta. But so Gino shows up and is trying to defeat her, and he thinks he does it, and so he lets his guard down, and she wrecks him. And then Saitama just sort of being there is like, oh, okay, cool. And then he gets her. He does do the thing.
I mean, I did like the comedy bit there where like Saitama's just like on his porch and like there's just a mosquito flying around his head and he's trying to get it so desperately, but he just keeps missing. And then he's just running down the street randomly when everyone's evacuated because like there's been reports that like all living creatures have been murdered by these giant swarms of mosquitoes. Saitama's just running trying to spray this mosquito, and he just kind of stumbles upon Genos in this instance. And Genos like fries all of the mosquitoes, just like combusts them all, and Saitama's in the midst of all of that, and now Saitama's just standing there naked.
Yeah, there's a lot of random comedy nudity in this show, and some of it's quite homophobic. This is not one of them, but, you know, it happens in a bit.
Yeah. And then Saitama basically just slaps the mosquito lady because Genos is about to die, because that's kind of Genos' whole thing. He can never win.
Yeah, he's the Vegeta, or the Piccolo, depending on what point in Dragon Ball you want to think about. Yeah, so the reason why Geno like really hops onto Team Saitama is some pretty generic anime backstory of like gotta get strong enough to avenge people type thing. He's like, oh, this dude's super strong. He's gonna be my sensei, and hey, can you be my sensei? And then Saitama just basically to get him to go away goes, yeah, sure, whatever, please leave me alone. And then he shows up the next day and he's like, oh, that's right, I agreed to this.
Yeah. And then from that point on, Genos just kind of tags along with Saitama most of the time. I feel like that kind of leads pretty well into like the next sequence of events, because it turned out that that mosquito lady was from this place called the House of Evolution.
I forgot about the House of Evolution.
What, you forgot about like one of the best comedy moments where Saitama freaks out about missing his grocery sale? I can see from the dead look in your eyes that you did not think it was that funny.
No, I mean it was whatever in the moment. Yeah.
But after they kill that mosquito lady, the House of Evolution sends like a bunch of their other weird experimental creatures after them, and of course they just kind of lay waste to them and then get the whole rundown on the House of Evolution. And Saitama's like, there's a grocery sale tomorrow, and Genos is like, okay, are we gonna like go fight the House of Evolution? And then then Saitama's like, yeah, right now. So then they just start running, and they find this giant tower just kind of like in the middle of nowhere, and Genos is like, okay, I'm just gonna obliterate it, because he has crazy firepower with his cyborg body. And that leads to them kind of finding the underground of this place. And Saitama just kind of goes running. Prior to this, you do get introduced to like the person behind the House of Evolution, but it's really not that important. It's just a crazy scientist who basically made himself young again and had been experimenting on shit ever since. And then he reveals his like strongest creature, which is called Carnage Kabuto. And they go fighting in like a giant square chamber that's specifically designed for absurd experiments like this, I guess. And this is kind of when you get the first, well, I mean, it is when you get told what Saitama's supposed secret is. Because the Carnage Kabuto guy is like going to go kill Saitama, and then like Saitama's just kind of standing there, and then Carnage Kabuto gets super freaked out all of a sudden and just like backs away and is like scared and like sweating.
My instincts tell me if I attacked him, he would kill me.
Yeah. And then everyone's just like, how did you get so strong? And then Saitama's like, well, you really want to know? I did 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, a 5-kilometer run, and 100 squats every day for 3 years.
And I slept without heat in the winter or AC in the summer.
And I just ate consistent 3 meals a day. You know, he would basically just lived a healthy lifestyle and supposedly broke some limiters along the way and also went bald.
He trained so hard he went bald.
And like this is when you get the first like real just like, oh yeah, this is just a parody of shonen manga, because like, you know, the whole point is he trained really hard and he became super strong, which is basically the point of every shonen manga. But this time, you know, it's meant in a comedy manner. It definitely raises a lot of questions, because like way down the line, I have no clue if they plan on like introducing a reason for why he became so strong, because I feel like there could be some crazy cosmic bullshit if that's the direction they want to go. But
I definitely don't think it'll happen. It definitely doesn't happen here in season 1. But I don't think it will happen, because I think it's antithetical to the point of it. Because I think the point of it is this dude just worked out, and now he's the strongerest.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the point. That's the joke that they're making.
Yeah.
And in this moment, Gino goes, hey, stop lying to us. If you don't want to tell us, that's fine, but stop lying to us, because nobody there believes him.
Yeah. One is funny because, you know, even though Genos doesn't believe him, he's like, oh, he's just telling a lie because he doesn't want to reveal his secret.
Yeah.
And thus, Carnage Kabuto starts just beating the crap out of Saitama, and
which is to say, he starts hitting him a bunch.
Yeah,
I will say.
And it's animated incredibly well. They just go flying around the chamber a bunch, and Saitama's just like sitting there like, oh my god, this guy said he's going to go on a rampage for a week. If
he said it ends on next Saturday, and if it's 7 days to today, that means today's Saturday. That means the sale!
See, you remember.
Yeah, I do. I just forgot in the moment because it wasn't that important.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the nice part about Saitama always winning is he always like ends up kind of giving these people that wanted to achieve an absurd level of strength like a new perspective on life, because like he beats this guy's like greatest achievement essentially, and then the scientist just witnesses it and is like, I think I'm good. I'm just gonna live the rest of my life peacefully.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I mean, that's just kind of like Saitama's way of being a hero, I guess.
It's his ninja way. It is worth noting, and we kind of glossed over it when we talked about his origin story, when he saved the kid those 3 years ago. Oh, by the way, he's only been doing that training regime for like 2.5, 3 years, I think he says. So, like, it's a pretty recent development. It's worth noting that when he did save that kid, he very much went, you know, it's funny because when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a hero. And then that's what kicks it off. So, like, he had a heroic draw at one point. But then, as we learn in these first couple episodes, I think he just straight up says it. that he doesn't feel anything anymore because nothing's exciting, because he knows nothing's gonna matter, because he'll get there, right? And he has this like dream nightmare thing about these like subterranean creatures coming up to claim the surface, and he's super excited because in the dream they're super strong, and he wakes up and he's like, oh yeah, that's what being excited feels like. And then the subterranean people pop up, and he's like, yeah, and they're super weak. And
Yeah, I actually completely forgot about that because I'm pretty sure that's the end of the first episode.
it's either it's either the end of the first episode or start of the second.
Well, because I believe that that's the end of the first episode because that's kind of the thing that like wraps up you understanding his plight, I guess. Because like he's like, I can't, nothing's exciting anymore, and then like it kind of just moves into this dream sequence, and you don't learn that it's a dream until the end, you know, which is cool and honestly also animated incredibly well. Like when this show does its fights, it really does its fights.
Oh yeah, to be sure. Like this show is very beautiful when it wants to be, and it wants to be beautiful most of the time. It's just for half the episode nothing's happening, and then for the other half of the episode lots is happening. So the fights are all beautifully animated. The walking around looks nice, but there's not that much to make look impressive. Yeah, and then every now and then it's comedically drawn poorly, which is like the original webcomic style.
Yeah. And then after that sequence, basically Saitama and Genos are just like, oh, we can make that sail. And then they just leave.
Yeah.
That kind of ends that little sequence of events. That I think that is also because that episode ends with, I think, the hero agency like catching wind of the power that Genos holds, That's also a running gag in this show is that like every time Saitama does anything that's insanely impressive, there's always someone else who also did something crazy impressive in that time span. So then Saitama never gets the notice,
Yeah. Or like and like it's never as impressive, but other people are there that are more notable than him, or that are more interesting than him, or that just because their fights last longer, people notice more.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of the next episode, I would say is probably one of the weaker episodes in the season.
Is this the one that makes me woefully uncomfortable, or is this the one where we're introduced to Crappy Ninja Boy?
Crappy Ninja Boy.
Okay, it's whatever. Not a lot happens in this episode.
Yeah, I mean, this whole episode is kind of just another like, oh, this is what Saitama could have turned out like, because it turns out there's this group of all bald men called the Paradisers who hate working and hate the system, so they somehow get a hold of these experimental power suits and just start trying to kill rich people. And then Saitama's like, oh my god, they're all bald. Everyone's going to think I'm one of this terrorist group.
Yeah, and like he basically goes out of his way to go, hey, they're biting my look, dude.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, they're on TV, and the news report says, yeah, and they shave their head to look more intimidating. And then he goes, shave their head? No. It feels kind of like you can't wear glasses without frames because some of us actually need glasses type moment. You can't just shave your head because some of us are actually bald.
Yeah. And then we get introduced to a character named Speedasound Sonic, who kind of just ends up becoming like somewhat of a rival for Saitama. Not really a rival, but more so just someone who witnesses Saitama's full strength and then wants to meet that level. Because that's kind of how this show builds itself, is like certain characters get introduced, they have an interaction with Saitama, they like actually understand how strong he is, and then that kind of becomes their motivating factor, And over the span of this series, Saitama really just kind of builds up this crew of people that actually know what he's capable of.
Yeah, and the one thing that I will say about Speed of Sound Sonic is that he's a good representation of a point of the show, which is Saitama does not get development. Maybe he does in season 2. Full disclosure, I haven't watched season 2 and I haven't read anything, so I don't know. But Saitama is unironically what Goku should be, which is to say, and largely what Goku is, but it is to say Saitama is there to win and everybody else is there to have the character development. Speed of Sound Sonic's not a great example of that, because he goes from being a bad guy under hire to being a bad guy, and that's about it. But like characters like Gino and like, you know, the other hero associates, shout outs, we haven't met him yet, but shout outs to Moomin Rider. I love him. Or maybe it's Moomin Rider.
Yeah, Moomin.
Anyway.
Well, that actually kind of reminds me, I never talked about like the history of this series, but like, did you know that One Punch Man in Japan is called One Pon Man? Like, that's how they pronounce it, because like they don't
the cha?
Yeah, and I think that's literally how it's like stylized. Like, we call it One Punch Man because that just sounds better in English, but like in Japan it's just like One Pon Man, but that's a play on a child, like a children's cartoon character named Anpan Man, who's like he's just like a little dude. I don't even know what he does, but his outfit is like the inverse of Saitama's. Like, he has a red jumpsuit with yellow gloves instead of the yellow with red. So they were like,
that's cute. I like that.
So like Saitama, you know, this whole show is meant to, you know, parody a lot of things. And I was actually reading earlier that the author he was inspired by another Japanese children's comic called Crayon Shin-chan, which I believe is like actually one of the like longest running shows of all time. I'm pretty sure it has like the most episodes out of any anime ever.
That is wild. While you're looking that up, I will say I'm very glad that we in the West don't call it One Pawn Man, because it feels like it would be one of those things that either get like aggressively shortened even further, or that people would try to say in like a weird like English type of like accent. And I don't know why, but that's just the vibes that it gives me if we tried to like make that the standard pronunciation or like the standard nomenclature in the West.
Yeah. I think it's like one of those things where, you know, like for Japanese viewers, you know, they're probably familiar with this other character. So like the wordplay makes more sense to them.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, anyway, we can get back to what was going on.
And yeah, that's pretty much it for that episode, I think. A quick shout outs to the leader of the Paradisers, Hammerhead. He's got such a thick skull that he just straight up takes a kunai to the back of the head and just plays dead rather than actually dying. And at the end of it, he just basically goes, yeah, I admit it, I'm doing this not for morals, but because I don't want to work. And honestly, at the time, it very much, like when I was watching this episode, I'm like, this is a pointless aside. Also, we just are really taking Saitama's word for it that he would have become a weird joke in like making fun of socialist concepts, because like Saitama is the reason why we see that Saitama could have turned into a villain, because he says, oh wow, I could have been one of these guys, but we never like see anything about his personality that would imply that he would be that sort of dude. I don't know, it feels a little heavy-handed.
I mean, I think I think the similarities are more so just like Saitama didn't have a job. He was trying to find a job. He was just kind of like, you know, a little, not desensitized, but just like,
dead in the eyes.
Yeah. Just like done with everything. And yeah, I mean, like obviously he wouldn't have turned out that way, but I think it's literally just meant to be like one of those few character remarks from him that's just like, oh yeah, I could have turned out like that. I don't really think it's meant to be taken that seriously.
It also very much felt like a tell rather than show, because it wasn't like we saw parallels between Saitama and these guys. It's Saitama goes, "Wow, there are parallels between me and these guys."
Yeah, well, it's actually interesting because there's some like side comics or like they're like little one-offs in One Punch Man that like I guess you could call them like the sub chapters. Like they're just like little adventures with Saitama, and there's actually a lot of them that are before he was like fully trained, when he was like starting to try to be a hero. And I mean, like obviously that's completely optional. They actually animated all of them, and they're like only on the Blu-ray. I haven't watched them all, but yeah, they give you just a little bit more insight into like what he was like beforehand. So it's like, I don't think it's necessary, obviously, but it's a good little thing you can watch if you really want to get more into his character.
I had no idea. Yeah, the only reason I stopped to mention Hammerhead is he has a very great moment in like literally the last episode that I like quite a bit.
Well, I mean, that one of my favorite parts about this show is genuinely how it like it like doesn't really forget anything. Like characters will show up and then like you'll know they exist, but you know, the show does a good enough job of like not necessarily keeping them relevant all the time, but still like, you know, here and there just being like, oh yeah, remember this guy? You know, I like that stuff because, you know, it makes it feel like characters don't just show up to be forgotten.
Yeah. Okay, so does the next episode introduce the two characters that I absolutely hate?
No, that's not until the Deep Sea King, I don't think, because we don't get introduced to
Wow, there are a lot of episodes before my full disclosure. I've got like 10 lines worth of notes, and they go from episode 2 to the Deep Sea King.
Well, because I mean, like we still haven't even got to the point where Saitama learns that there's a hero association, because he doesn't even know at this point that there's a hero.
Oh yeah.
Like I love how the beginning of the show he's like being a hero, but like he doesn't even know the concept of like the hero association, and Genos is the one that kind of tells him about it, because he's like, you can't just like be like, people kind of view like off the hook heroes like kind of weird, like we should probably join the association.
Yeah, it's like, in the instigating factor for that, and kind of the only real reason why the Paradisers are there is as he's looking around for them to stop them so that he doesn't get associated with them. Somebody's like, oh, this dude's bald, he's a Paradiser, and he goes, no, I'm the dude who's a hero for fun, and everyone goes, what? Yeah. And then at the end of the episode, he's talking to Gino. It's like, yeah, that dude didn't even know me. And he's like, well, are you registered?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's also a great moment, because basically this whole episode is them just, like, going to do the hero exam, and Saitama obviously just blows everything out of the water. And I love how there's like this evidence to support that Saitama is absurdly strong, and yet some people just like don't even care. Like, well, and that like that's the point, is like Genos and Saitama both get really good marks on like the physical stuff, but Saitama's just kind of stupid, so he doesn't like get very good marks on the written exam, and Genos does. So Genos just like shoots all the way up to S-class hero. Which I guess we could explain like what the class system is. I mean, if you've seen it,
C through S.
Yeah, it's like there's C, B, and A going up in strength, and then S is like all of the strongest heroes. And Genos, because of that thing that he did to the House of Evolution, is like the Hero Association is like, oh, you just obliterated this whole mountainside. You want to be an S-class hero?
They imply that they've been like keeping tabs on him and his activity, like, so he talks to Saitama about the thing. It's like, yeah, you should go get registered, and Saitama's like, well, do you want to? I'll do it if you do it. And so we get like the Hero Association getting really excited that Genos is registering, because they're like, oh, we've been keeping an eye on him for a while. And then like the like cherry on top was just absolutely giving it to the House of Evolution.
Yeah, and one of my favorite things kind of just like a cherry on top of like Saitama being so strong is like they actually reveal that, well, I think Genos reveals that like the Hero Association was created after the son of some like political official or something got saved by someone, and it just so happens that that child was the one that Saitama saved from the crab monster. You see a picture of him. He's the kid with the butt chin.
I didn't see that. I
And
didn't
so
get that.
so like literally the implication is that Saitama doing that was the impetus for the entire
that
Hero
can't
Association.
be true, though, because that would have only been like 4 years ago. He might have been that
Yeah,
kid's...
they say that the Hero Association has only existed for 3 years.
Oh, so it's the dad of the kid who got saved, not the kid
No,
who
the
got
kid
saved.
got saved, and the dad decided to. He had a shit ton of money, so he
the
decided
dad
to
had the
found
money.
the
Okay.
association, and that was 3 years ago. And so, like, the implication is just straight up like Saitama is the reason that the Hero Association even exists, but no one literally even knows who he is.
I didn't catch that. That's cool. I like that.
It's just a little nice tad bit
a
of
little-
world building.
That was a chef's kiss, by the way. Just let him...
And then, yeah, so Genos gets S class, Saitama gets shoved into C class because they're
Bottom
like,
C.
he broke every possible record in the physical exam, but he sucked at he got 71 on the written test.
Yeah,
Which,
so-
I mean, like, is kind of bullshit. I mean, like, I get it. Like, you're like, yeah, he's not that smart, but, like, if he's literally beaten every feasible like record, why the hell wouldn't you just put him at the top of like A class or something?
So it's worth noting that how it works is out of a possible 100, up to 50 of it is the physical exam, and up to 50 of it is the written exam. And basically they go, yeah, he scored perfectly on the physical exam. He's broken all of our records. Like in the side-to-side jumps, you see like indents where his feet were. Like we watch him punch multiple strength testing machines into oblivion. He breaks a whack-a-mole game because apparently there's a whack-a-mole test. In standing long jump, he jumps so high that his head just lodges into the top of this like 30-foot high ceiling, right? Like we watch all of that. But yeah, I guess that's a solid point. Why does 72 put you at the bottom of C? Does everybody come in at the bottom of C? If so, like, that actually raises a lot of questions.
And I mean, obviously, it's literally just for plot's sake. It's like,
Right.
oh yeah, we need to give Saitama a motivation.
Yeah,
moving
now the
forward.
strong... Yeah. Now the strong guys in the weak guy category, right? And on top of that, your point about if he's really strong, why put him at the bottom? One of my few notes that I took in like the last couple of episodes is thank God for these heroes that, or like on these heroes' behalf, thank God that most of superheroing appears to just be beating up bad guys. Because if this was like My Hero Academia style, where you had to like demonstrate your ability to save people in like public relations, none of the S-class heroes would be heroes, because none of them bother saving people. None of them bother caring about what people think. Like, they legitimately are only good at being strong. And if that's all that you need to be an S-class hero, you're right. Why isn't, even though he only got like 22 out of 50 points on the written exam, why isn't he higher?
Yeah. I mean, and this is something that, like, is way later down the line, but they talk about how, like, the S-class hero category got made because like these were people that were absurdly strong before the association got founded, but like they didn't want to be heroes, and the association was like, okay, we'll just give you guys the highest rank and you can like be a part of the association, but like, so basically, yeah, they're all just kind of assholes who don't do anything. And like that's kind of driven home quite a few times. Like they're all just so like self-centered that like they never work together. They don't like care that much. They're just absurdly strong people.
Yeah. Like, out of all of them, like, I think pretty much just Gino in the S-class actually care about helping people. Like, I mean, I guess...
Silverfang kind of does.
Silverfang kind of, but he's an old man, and so it's not clear as to whether or not he doesn't do more because he's an old man, or if he doesn't do more because he doesn't care. We can talk about him when we get to him. Anyway, the two of them become heroes. A quick aside, there's a pretty inconsequential moment where so people don't like newbies taking their jobs, basically, is what somebody says to them. And so there's this C-class hero by the name of Tiger Tank Top, or Tank Top Tiger. Tank Top Tiger basically runs into Saitama. So C rank heroes need to meet a superhero quota each week, where it's just like a quota of crime stopped. But because only the important stuff makes the news, like C-class heroes are expected to do like the purse snatching and all of that stuff. So Saitama's like running around desperately looking for crimes to meet his quota, and somebody just like reports him because he looks so intense and he looks scary when he's intense, apparently. So C-class hero Tank Top Tiger comes up and goes to basically crush the new guy. And so he's like, yeah, make a scene, get angry so I can beat your ass. And yeah.
I mean, that's a good moment because that kind of brings Speed of Sound Sonic back into it, which like he's kind of a pointless character, but like this is like Saitama's first time like fighting like bad guy, and it's a really funny scene because like this kind of goes into the whole like Saitama doesn't have great like sense of what being a hero is, you know, because like Speed of Sound Sonic is this guy who Saitama knows isn't strong enough to beat him, but like Saitama also hasn't seen him do like actually bad things yet. So then like Saitama's like, man, I still don't like have like this is the last day of his like hero quota, because like you learn that for C-class people they have to like keep meeting these like weekly quotas in order to like stay a hero, and Saitama's super stressed about that. And then like Speed of Sound Sonic just shows up and like knocks out Tank Top Tiger. And then everyone's like, oh my god, what are we gonna do? Everyone's gonna die. And then Saitama's just like, oh, he's like, man, I wish there was a bad guy around. And then Speed of Sound Sonic just like is just like throwing exploding shurikens at people, and just like Saitama's like, oh, that's a bad guy. And then he just like goes and beats him into the ground like instantaneously.
There are a couple of moments where he basically goes, shush, dude, I know you're not a villain, you're just some guy who wants to be, shush, you're just distracting me. And then people around him are like, oh my god, it's a villain. And he's like, okay, sure, if you say so.
I mean, that's basically that whole episode, right? Because doesn't that, I believe that happens in the same episode they become heroes.
It's either the same episode or the next one.
Yeah, because I mean, the next one leads to kind of getting introduced to like monsters in City Z, where Saitama lives. Yeah, because basically Saitama also just lives in an uninhabited section of a city because like so much terrible stuff happens there that no one wants to live there anymore. And so Saitama is like the only one living in this apartment building with Genos. There's a really funny moment where like some heroes show up to like fight this monster, and Genos is like, the perimeter alarm went off. And then he's like, oh, they're leaving. It's fine. As he's just like cleaning the toilet.
Also, apparently they have a perimeter alarm around.
Well, I think it was supposed to be Genos's like specific, because I think he
like
has
cyborg
one
brain.
Yeah, in his body. Yeah, I mean, and that episode also is just kind of comedic. It's just like supposed to bring up the concept of monsters again, because like monsters just kind of exist in this world. There's a couple heroes that show up to fight this seaweed monster.
Shoutouts to Golden Ball, which is definitely not a black guy, and Springer Mustache, or Spring Mustachio.
Oh yeah, Spring Mustachio. Yeah.
I love him. He's a big old dandy. He's like Slayer from Guilty Gear levels of dandy, and he fights with like a rapier that apparently he can like manipulate the like shape of it.
Yeah, he's pretty hype. He's actually relevant later down the line too. But they like lose, and then of course Saitama's just like walking home, and then this Kombu monster like decides to attack him, and Saitama just like brings home the seaweed that was on this monster.
Another example of Saitama stopping a crime, but nobody was around to watch him do it, so he didn't get credit for it.
Well, yeah, he didn't get credit, but he also like blew up an entire building. So then another group of like C-class heroes show up, and they're like, "Oh my god, what kind of monster lives here?" Yeah, I mean, it's all just played for laughs because that's the point of
And
the
then
show.
we know that time passes because all of the seaweed from the head of the monster gets eaten over the course of the next couple of scenes.
Yeah. And Genos is like, I hear that kombu is good for hair growth. And Saitama's like,
That's not why I got it, I swear.
yeah, that's kind of like all of that. I mean, I think that whole episode isn't really that much to write home about. The next episode is like when things like kind of heat up. I actually really love the next episode because the next episode deals with this giant meteor that's hurtling towards Japan or wherever they live and is about
That's before the Deep Sea King?
Yeah, that's the
So
episode
much
before the
happens
deep.
before the Deep Sea King that I just don't. I have 2 notes before the Deep Sea King.
Well, the Deep Sea King is like the last thing before the final 3 episodes. Because I mean, like a lot of this is just build up. Because like this is, I mean, that last episode or the episode where like Saitama's like running around and like freaking people out kind of introduces this concept of like people not believing in Saitama or like what he's capable of. And the next episode really hits that home because the next episode deals with this meteor and like all the S-class heroes get called in. And this is when we first get introduced to a guy named Silverfang, who's just like a old martial artist guy.
The Master Roshi stand-in, except not a pervert to our knowledge.
Significantly better. And he like just kind of gets introduced to Genos for the first time because Genos goes into the Hero Association and then they learn, well then that's when Genos gets told about this meteor coming down and then Genos just runs to fucking hit it because he's like, well, there's no other options. And of course, Silverfang kind of just tags along because Silverfang's like, yeah, I'm just prepared to die because...
Yeah, so this is one of those things where they like really show that most of the S-class heroes really don't give a shit about helping people. Literally, the only people who show up are Genos and Silverfang, and it's because they were nearby.
Well, and then another character gets introduced named Metal Knight, who's like, he's like a drone that this hyper intelligent guy wields. That's just like basically a giant robot.
It's like a big old weapons platform on a mech type character.
Yeah.
And Genos is like, oh, you're here risking your life? And he's like, nah, dude, this is a drone. I'm so far away. I just want to see if these new guns work.
Yeah. And then they don't. So then he just pieces out. And then Genos is like, okay, this is my chance. I just have to give everything. And then, because that's what Genos does. Like, literally every time Genos does anything, he's like, this is the end of me. I have to give it my all. I'm going to die here.
Not all the time. In the first couple of fights, he's like, okay, cool, I got this. Okay, this is done. Oh, I let my guard down, and they just absolutely suckered me from the back. Yeah. Like, against the mosquito lady, he thought that he killed her when he incinerated the big swarm, and so he turns to talk to Saitama, and then she just slashes him up while his back's turned. And then against the beetle... something similar happens. I forget why exactly he stops paying attention to the beetle, but he stops paying attention to the beetle.
Well, because the beetle like beats him back and like fries him with his own fire. Remember? Like, like Genos like shoots a giant fireball and then he just like sucks in a bunch of air and straight up blows it right back at him. And then his hair just turns into an afro.
I do remember the afro.
And then like Saitama just like catches Genos and is like, sit this one out. Yeah, but so Genos is like, I'm gonna give it my all. He like plugs his like power core into his arm. It's actually a pretty hype moment.
It's a very cool scene.
And then he just like blasts this thing. And of course it literally does nothing. But then Bang's like, or Silverfang. He also goes by Bang. I honestly
I think
can't remember.
Bang's his name, and then Silverfang is his hero name.
Oh, yeah, that makes
because
sense.
they make a point of going, hey, Gino, I know that you're new, or Genos, I know that you're new, but don't call superheroes by their human name because then they won't have any privacy. Use their hero name, damn it. But yeah, so like Genos does this because he's like, well, I'm not like basically Silverfang goes like, oh, so are you gonna run away now, kid? And he's like, no. And he's like, okay, cool. Then don't think too hard about this. And he's like, oh, well, yeah. If I'm gonna die anyway, I might as well put my life on the line trying to save people. That's like his big realization here.
Well, I mean, I do Silverfang is genuinely one of my favorite characters in this story. And like, yeah, I know we were saying like this kind of shows that like the S-class heroes truly don't care about anyone, but like I think Bang also is the kind of person that is like, oh yeah, there's literally nothing I am capable of doing in this situation, which is like, that's a fair thing to do.
In this
like,
moment, he's like, yeah, I'm just a martial arts dude. This is a meteor,
he's
like half the size of the moon.
Yeah.
Like, he does say that, yeah, I didn't show up because I think I could help. I showed up because my family's dojo's here, and if it's going down, I'm old enough that I'm going down with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, Silverfang...
The rest of them don't care.
Yeah, the rest of them don't care. I think Silverfang is the best one.
Oh, to be sure. A character that we run into later, Tornado, definitely could have handled this all by herself.
Yeah, exactly. And so Saitama shows up.
Don't you worry, I'll talk about her later.
Saitama shows up in the last bit and is like, I'm going to do it. And then he just punches it. And then, of course, it obliterates into a bunch of debris.
Because it was already like pretty low atmosphere. Like it was like a couple of seconds from crashing in when he showed up. And so he did stop it from like falling in one piece and therefore destroying... Oh, excuse me. And therefore destroying literally everything. But the debris still comes through and destroys a decent amount of the city.
Yeah, and like... I would argue that I think Saitama literally would have been capable of like
just catching it,
just destroying all of the debris, because like
it is inconsistent.
We've seen him do stuff, or we see him do stuff later that's like, yeah, you literally could have probably just done full strength and literally like disintegrated that thing.
Yeah, there are moments where he punches things into non-existence, and then there are moments where he punches things into little pieces. This is a punches things into pieces moment, and it is inconsistent. I didn't think about that, but you're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
I mean, but this like brings up, I mean, I think the whole point of this scene is literally just to develop this aspect of Saitama being a hero now, where like Bang witnessed this, or Silverfang witnessed this, so like now he's aware of literally how strong Saitama is. And I love Silverfang because he's 100% on Saitama's side for the rest of the series after this. And like after this moment, Saitama just kind of goes out on a stroll, and you know, everyone's trying to pick up after all this debris wrecked half the city.
And now we're introduced to the second Tank Top brother, Tank Top Black Hole, who's there with Tank Top Tiger, and they're like, oh, this dude, I hate this dude. Oh no, he's getting credit for this. I'm going to stage a riot, basically, where I'm going to get everyone mad at him for not saving the day better, and make it so that it seems like he's stealing other people's credit.
Yeah, and I mean that's an important moment because it lets you in on some insight about Saitama's character. I mean, like, yeah, I would say Saitama doesn't really develop much, but I think you get to know what he cares about, you know, because he understands that like he didn't, you know, save the day super well, and like all these people are like chanting at him like, stop being a hero, stop being a hero, and like he's just kind of there, and then he like screams at the top of his lungs. He's just like, nothing, like, I get it, I didn't do everything right, but like, what are you gonna do? Like, he's basically just kind of like,
yeah, fight me, dude.
Yeah, and it's like, that's a fair reaction, and I like that aspect of Saitama because he still did a good thing, but he's not so like fed up with like being. Well,
there's
treated.
Also like there's an aspect of this that I also really like, because like right before he starts shouting back to the crowd, Genos is gonna like basically step in on his behalf and sort of like a how dare you, this guy saved your life type of moment. And then Saitama like goes, come at me, bro. And at least with how Genos reads the situation, he's recognizing Saitama as somebody who understands that these people lost something and are hurt and need someone to be mad at. So whether or not that is Saitama, like what Saitama's doing, we don't really know one way or the other, but that is like a reading of it that the show puts on it through Genos, and the show hasn't given us a reason to believe him to be wrong. But like, yeah, like Saitama does go, yeah, I do this as a hobby, but at the same time, he got into it to help people, right? So it's like, we're kind of up in the air. Nothing's really confirmed. It does feel a little bit like, because Genos is saying he's doing it so that people have someone to be mad at, it does feel like that's like what you're supposed to think when I watched it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. But I mean, I also think it's just meant to convey this aspect of Saitama's personality where, like, he doesn't need the appreciation of the people. You know, he's not like your average hero where, like, he only cares about his, like, appearance or, like, his, I guess, appearance to the public. Because there's a character that gets introduced later named My Mask, whose whole thing is literally just...
He's already introduced at this point.
Oh,
he's introduced at the end of the test.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I forgot about that.
But either way, he's not important yet.
Yeah.
He's a pop star, though.
And Silverfang kind of has a brief moment here at the end of this episode where he, like, watches this happen to Saitama, and he's like, you're entering into a cutthroat world. Like, if you get, like, the sooner you get out of it, the better. Like, I see that you're, like, too good for this, for, like, what being a hero is, you know. And he doesn't step in because of that. He's like, you know, you'd probably be better off if you just weren't in the Hero Association.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's kind of like, hey, man, if you can't put up with this, then this job's going to crush you. So,
well, but I also think,
what you do.
I think it's also like, partially he's like, I know that you're super strong. So, like, yeah. Like, either you'll be fine with this or you won't, basically.
Yeah, yeah. It's very much I'm going to let you make this choice and let you show whether or not you're strong enough to handle this part of the job.
And then that kind of brings us into the next, like, short arc. This story loves introducing these different groups of races that are, like, from different parts of the planet. Like, we got introduced to the Subterraneans that, like, live under the earth. We're getting introduced to the Sea Folk, I think is what they call themselves.
Yeah, the Sea Clan, Sea something.
But they're just, like, basically a group of monsters that all look like sea creatures that live on the bottom of the ocean. And they just randomly decide to show up on land and kill everyone because they're like, we're better than you. And that's just kind of how this show goes. It's just like... It would suck to live in this world because every 5 seconds there's a cataclysmic event going on.
If you are not a hero level person who has the ability to vacate the city quickly, your life is just a series of hoping nothing bad happens that day.
Yeah. And this, hey, we get to talk about the character you hate.
Both of them. Yay!
Wait, who's the other one?
I don't like Deep Sea King, just because he makes me woefully uncomfortable. Why does Sea Monster Man have heart nipples? Why does Sea Monster Man have Speedo? Why does Sea Monster Man have noticeable dick bulge? Fish don't have dicks. What is this? And so, yeah,
I mean, he's just comedic design, I feel like.
My notes go from horny mosquito lady, empty all of your stored juices into me. So much ass, my God. And then the next line is, the Sea King makes me uncomfy. Puri puri prisoner, sigh. So an A-rank hero shows up and holds up off all of the, like, lower ranking sea folk, sea clan, whatever. And then the Deep Sea King shows up and rocks them. But S-class hero, Puri Puri Prisoner, who is one of the more egregious depictions of a gay person in an anime, and that is inclusive of the 90s and 80s as well. This is a very awkward intersection between this being a comedy anime, so therefore everybody's played for jokes, and the Japanese culture still not really being where we would like it to be as far as accepting the LGBTQ community. Very much a effeminate but very strong, very, very like buff dude who, and I quote, is serving a life sentence because I can't resist attacking beautiful men. And he's real rapey. And there's a moment where, so like his big fighting gimmick is that he has his angel transformation and it's just him getting naked. And that's like played for comedy's sake in the first bit, but this was already after he offhandedly mentioned that he was a rapist. So that's super not great. Oh, also in this moment, Supersonic on the ground, roundabout by like Wemu. He also
I think,
just like used
Saitama calls him Jack-o'-lantern Panic or something like that.
Jack-o'-lantern Panic is a great name. He also like uses Puri Puri prisoners escape as an excuse to just leave jail. But Puri Puri prisoner does not get better. And in fact, later he breaks into the hospital where a couple of A-class heroes who are recovering, and he breaks in to give them non-consensual enemas. That's not great.
Is that what that was supposed
Yes,
to be? Okay,
1,000%.
I did not catch that.
Big yikes.
Yeah, no, he's
also,
the most yikes character.
Also, unless he has a boyfriend. At the very least, the sweater that he breaks, that his muscles rip apart when he does his first angel transformation, which honestly I will say I did enjoy the angel transformation. If you could divorce it from the rest of his character, the angel transformation is very funny because it's like you get the cutaway, you get the transition. He starts glowing like a Sailor Moon thing, and you're like, oh my god, he's going to turn into a Sailor Moon. And then no, he just pops out after like ripping through his clothes. It's a very good comedy moment. It does not redeem the character by any way, shape, or form. But in that moment, he's like, oh my god, you made me tear through the sweater that my boyfriend made me. But he's still very much trying to fuck some of the A-class heroes. So unless he's like openly polyamorous, which we don't confirm, it also perpetuates stereotypes about gay men not being faithful. Like, it's not great, in addition to all of the other like rapey overtones. Like when Forrest and I were doing a little recording discussion, he said, I knew we were going to have to talk about him, and you're goddamn right we're going to have to talk about him.
I mean, I said that not as like, oh yeah, we have to talk about him, but it's good to talk about him because I've never seen anyone talk about him. And it's certain aspects of this story that just kind of get like, brushed over because it's just like, a lot of people love this series, so it's just like, aspects of it that aren't really acceptable, they should be discussed. And I do think Puri Puri Prisoner is one of those aspects because he's just kind of, he's not the greatest character. He's just kind of there to make fun of gay people in just kind of an insensitive way.
Yep, an aggressively insensitive way. Which is a shame because my note before this was this show is very homoerotic because a lot of characters are real naked in a lot of ways, and like a lot of JoJo's Cars Wemu Pillarman type ways where brief aside, when I was running the anime club for that high school, one of my kids, when we were watching JoJo's, one of my LGBTQ kids was like, this show is too gay for me, I can't. Which, very funny moment in my life. But yeah, it's like, wow, this show is a lot of like Wham Karu energy. And then it became very homophobic energy very quickly and 100% concentrated in Puri Puri Prisoner.
True.
Anyway, then it starts raining and the Sea King goes beast mode because it's like being in the water.
Yeah. And he just rocks the shit out of Puri Puri Prisoner, and Speed of Sound Sonic tries to fight him but also can't really stand up to him, so then he just runs away because he's like, I gotta get my weapons. And then
he also gets naked in this scene.
Oh yeah, because like the Deep Sea King keeps like hitting him, but he's so fast that like he just catches his clothes, and then like at the end he like grabs him full on, but then like, and you think he caught Sonic, but then he just crushes, and then it's just the clothes in his hand. I mean, like, yeah,
There is a very great payoff to Supersonic being naked. Speed of Sound Sonic, excuse me.
that's quite the sentence.
Fair enough. You know, if you asked me what I was going to say today, I never would have imagined. If you gave me 100 times, 100 tries. There's a very good payoff where Speed of Sound Sonic runs into the character that we shouted out earlier, Moomin Rider, who's the C-class hero who's been around a couple of times, and honestly, he's just trying his best, and he's just a guy who tries. He runs into Moomin Rider, and they talk for a little bit, and then when he leaves, Moomin Rider goes, "Why was that pervert here?"
Oh yeah.
Like, fair enough, if I saw a dude naked in an abandoned part of the city, I'd also assume he was a pervert if he was just talking to me normally.
Well, and then I love how Moomin Rider runs into Saitama, and then Saitama and him are like on the bike, and then Saitama sees Speed of Sound Sonic like run past like super fast, and he's like, "Did you just see like a naked guy run by?" And then he's like, "I'm gonna go check that out."
Yeah.
And then Moomin Rider's like, "Okay." I do. Moomin Rider is just a good example of like what I think this show is kind of trying to say about what it means to be a hero. Because like, I mean, obviously it's a comedy, like, but I do think it has its nuances, and I think that like Moomin Rider isn't a strong person. Like, he literally is shown to like have zero, like not zero, but like very limited physical strength. But he just wants to do good by people.
Yeah, he's just a normal guy trying his best.
And like, people still believe in him, and there's a really good moment where they're fighting the Deep Sea King, and like he comes in and he can't do anything. Like, the Deep Sea King literally just grabs him by the arm and just wiggles him around and then throws him and he still stands up again, and like everyone's like cheering him on, and it's like, yeah, I thought that was a really good moment.
Yeah, it's a genuinely... Okay, so in the episode, fighting happens. All of the citizens from that area of the city gets evacuated to the shelter, and the Deep Sea King finds the shelter and just starts going at it. And so, like, an off-duty C-class hero, by that I mean a C-class hero who decided to evacuate with the rest of the civilians because he's a C-class hero, and this is an Oni-level threat. The threat system, Oni's, like, the second highest. And he's like, "I'm just a C-class hero. I can't do anything here." The Deep Sea King pops up. He's like, "Ah, ha, ha, people to kill." And this random C-class guy just basically is like, "I'm going to stall until the S-class get here by talking to this guy." And then that stops working. And so the lowest ranking A rank hero and a couple of B rank heroes show up and are like, "Oh God, we're heroes, I guess." And it's honestly a little bit of a redemption for Snick.
Oh yeah, we never even mentioned him.
Snick. So after Gino and Saitama do their test, they're given like a little bit of like an orientation where Saitama just doesn't pay attention, and so Snick is like, "Oh, I'm gonna crush this rookie." He actually introduces us to the concept, and so he like tries to jump Saitama, and we just like hard cut to Saitama walking away, and Snick just crumpled on the ground,
just like literally in a crater of his own body, just like slammed into the ground.
Yeah, and so we get like a bit of a redemption for Snick here. Where it's like, yeah, he's standing up to this dude who he has no chance against because he's a hero. And so they all get their asses kicked, and then Genos finally shows up because there was like a, "Oh, where are they?" type of thing. And Genos is doing okay. He's doing the best so far, but he also eventually just gets outdone because he
falls
like
into the same trap he always falls into.
With a little bit more justification this time, because he's like holding his own, and he's giving the civilians time to evacuate. And this one little girl goes, "I believe in you." And then the Deep Sea King goes, "All right, little girl, you're dead now." And then he goes to spit acid at her. And so Gino does that the like Piccolo saving Gohan from Nappa thing, where rather than just pulling her out of the way,
Yeah, right.
he just sort of dives in front of the acid glob, which is enough for the Deep Sea King to go like, okay, cool, so you're done now, right?
Which we literally know that Genos is fast enough to do that. Because he does it at the end of the show, in like the final scene. He just catches someone and moves them really fucking fast. And you're just like, why didn't you just do that, bro? Like, I get it was in the moment, but you didn't have to just leap in front of the acid.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those heroic sacrifices that maybe canonically needed to happen, but also, like, from what we've seen, we have no reason to believe that he couldn't. It's worth noting that, like, everybody who's, like, A-class and above at this point, with the exception of Snick, are at the power level where they would be the main character in their own anime. Like, that's the level of, like, over-the-top, ridiculous fights that we're talking about. And they are gorgeously animated each and every time. So Genos is, like, instant transmission style fast. He can't teleport, but yeah, in Dragon Ball, people can move faster at this point than you can instant transmission. Like, so yeah, that happens, and right before Deep Sea King turns to eat the people, Moomin Rider, who we've mentioned his bike. It's literally a bicycle. It's not a motorcycle. It's literally just a pedaling bicycle. He comes in with a Justice Crash, and he fucking crashes the bicycle into Deep Sea King, who just looks very annoyed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I mean, and then that kind of just like, continues as to what I said, where Moon Rider can't really do anything.
God,
But
he tries, and it's such a genuinely touching moment as, like, all of the civilians go from being genuinely hopeless to, like, really pouring all of their hopes into this guy. And if this was any other anime, this would be his time to rise above.
yeah.
But
I mean, and it has to be a catalyst for Saitama to show up. But I mean, like, I do really like the moment because Saitama, like, catches him before he falls to the ground, and he's like, good fight.
yeah, good job, man.
And yeah, I mean, like, Saitama respects this guy, and then the Deep Sea King is like, oh, you're just another weakling, aren't you? And then just, like, slams Saitama's head, and it just kind of bounces and doesn't, it's like, literally doesn't do anything. And then Saitama just, what does Saitama do?
He does the thing!
Yeah. He just, like, obliterates the Deep Sea King in one punch, and then it just, like, pushes all the rain away. I love that.
Yeah, he blows away the storm with the force of his punch.
And then I love how they, like, play it back later, and you just, like, don't even see it. It's just like...
Yeah. So I have a question. Before we leave the Deep Sea King, Forrest, I said in an earlier episode that you're, like, more of the took Japanese in college type of weeb. Do you know of, like, a cultural significance in Japanese, like, pop fiction of perverted kings? Because as I was thinking about it, the thought just occurred to me that Deep Sea King is very much done up in the same style as the perverted king shadow of the first major villain in Persona 5.
I mean, honestly, I don't know. I'm not, like, super familiar with, like, just Japanese stories. Like, it could just be... I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's just, like, some older Japanese, like, folk tales or stories, that just kind of, like, deal with stuff like that. But
If you would like to educate us in the comments, go for it, dude. If you're gonna actually us, I assume you've done that quite a lot already, because we've been speaking in quite broad strokes.
Yeah.
So I can't stop you.
Well, I mean, I guess before we go to, like, I assume we're done with Deep Sea King, because I feel like that whole plot is over.
Yeah, the episode ends basically with the equivalent of a, well, actually, guy who has just been saved by all of these people buying time for Saitama to show up. Just going, wow, the rest of these guys aren't heroic at all. They suck. You guys suck. Because all that matters in being a hero is being strong enough to protect us. And it's like, shut up, dude. And to be fair, other people in the crowd are like, hey, shut up, dude. They just risked their lives. And he basically just goes, yeah, and that just means that they're bad at being heroes. The only heroic one here is that one. And this is another moment where you like really see that Saitama's not in it for the glory, because and I don't remember if it's at the end of this episode or if it's like a flashback in the next episode, but he basically turns and goes, yeah, these guys all weakened him for me. Make sure to keep them alive, because if they die, then I can't steal anybody else's credit. Like, he goes out of his way to fall on, like, the sword of negative public opinion for the sake of the rest of those heroes. And it's like, good guy. Way to play, dude.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of... I feel like that's kind of the culmination of, like, the short character arc that was like built throughout this season, you know, because, you know, everyone like saw this happen, you know, but, you know, ultimately it could literally just be chalked up to like, oh yeah, the other heroes weakened the guys, so Saitama didn't actually do that good of a job, you know. But like, yeah, it comes back to Saitama doesn't need the public to appreciate him, to be a hero, because he's a hero for fun, and like he's not going to stop being a hero. So it's like people can believe in him or not. And I like that. I think it's probably like the very end of this episode where like they get a bunch of fan mail, and like Genos has a bunch and Saitama literally has 2, and one of them is
one of
like
them's hate mail.
Yeah, one of them's like, you suck, and then Saitama's like, this is a guy with a lot of free time. I love that scene.
Yeah, Genos is like, oh no, this is gonna like really hurt my master. Like, I'm gonna burn this letter. And Saitama's just like, oh wow, this dude has nothing better to do in his day.
Yeah, and then there's the one that's like, thank you, which, you know, it's good. And you learn that that's actually Moomin Rider who said... but I was going to say, since we're going into, like, the final bit of the season,
closest thing that's, like, actually could be called a spoiler.
Do you want to do our... would you add it to the list now?
Yeah, now's a good time to break for it.
So, Jack, would you add this to your list?
No. Unless you're here for an action anime, and even then, I would say just watch YouTube compilations of the fights. From everything that Season 1 shows us, there are some nice moments, and the Moomin Rider moment, like, we didn't, like... It's hard to convey how powerful that moment for Moomin Rider was, and that was a very powerful moment. But the rest of the shows, like... If you want something on in the background, I would listen to the sub while I was, or to the dub while I was doing other things. But like, if you want the action, just watch compilations of the action. And if you want character development, watch something else, right? And this is, you know, before anybody who's current on in like the webcomic. Oh, excuse me, I'm going to take that again. Before anybody who's current in the webcomic or people who've watched Season 2, like, hop on me, within the context of just Season 1, I would not add it to my list. Quick aside, though, I would add the intro song to literally every playlist ever. Oh my god, it's a banger. It's the platonic ideal of a banger. The outro is good, but it's nothing to write home about.
The outro is really funny to me just because it's like such a like anime outro. It just like doesn't match. And I feel like it's almost on purpose. It's supposed to be like one of those just like, oh yeah, this just does not match the tone of the
it
show.
Very much reminds me of like a Yu Yu Hakusho, like Rurouni Kenshin outro. But again, oh my god, the main theme's so good.
See, I love the main theme, but I'm not as stoked on it as a lot of other people are. Like, it's just good, but I'm never like, oh my god, this is amazing.
That's sort of like halfway between like rock ballad, power metal. Like, like it sits so perfectly in the like, I'm gonna do some stuff.
Also visually, it's
very gorgeous, but like just the music. Anyway, so in short, no, but I would watch compilations. Hey, Forrest, would you add it to your list?
I mean, I think, yeah. I don't know. I don't think it's one season. It's just a really fun watch. And I mean, like, obviously, as Jack said, you don't need to, like, if you're looking for character development, probably go to a different show. But if you just love what shonen has to offer as a genre, like, this is literally just kind of like the epitome of shonen, just like distilled down into its finest form. I mean, maybe not finest form, but yeah, really good form. Like, yeah, I don't know. I just love the fights. I like the characters. I mean, I think it just kind of still holds a place in my heart because it was like one of the first series that I watched kind of as it was coming out. Yeah, and on rewatch, I'm definitely like, this isn't the greatest thing ever, but it's just it's just a blast to watch, and it's also beautifully animated. So yeah, I would personally add it to the list, but you can also literally just do what Jack said and just watch compilations of the fights because they all look super dope.
Yeah, and full disclosure, I might have played my hand early this episode when I was talking like, yeah, so many people hyped this up. I was expecting to really not like this show. I think it was because people sold it as a comedy anime more than it really is. Like, there is humor in it, but the humor's not the point. The point is that it is a loving parody of shonen, and it's very loving and it's very parody, and that's where the humor comes from, and that's also where the show's strong points are, I think.
I would also say read the manga if you're not going to watch the anime, because honestly, the manga is like incredibly well drawn. So like if you just want to see some like really good art, like there's the web comic, and then for those who don't know, this series was started in 2009 as a webcomic by the author who goes by One.
One what?
Just One. That's his
One
pen
Punch?
name. His pen name is
Psycho 100?
One Psycho 100, yeah.
Psycho 100 XX.
And so he's actually still doing the webcomic, but then another manga author named Yusuke Murata picked it up, and, well, he actually picked it up because One was initially going to stop drawing it when it was still a webcomic. I don't think it was, like, picking up enough popularity, but I guess, like, somehow Yusuke Murata got his eyes on it, and he was already, like, a pretty established author / artist at that point. He did a series called Ice Shield 21, which is about football, like American football, which I know nothing about. I've never watched or read, but maybe that's a show we could watch. I don't know how many episodes are in the first season.
There are so many sports anime that are actually on my personal list that I'm not going to add American football to my list.
I've heard it just gets.
Unless
I've heard
it's
it's just
Battle Baller.
like gets insane. Like I've heard it like it's like shown in American football where like they
to
get
be
crazy.
sure.
They get
I'm
crazy
sure-
powers at the end.
I'm sure this is the Prince of Tennis of football shows, but
But anyway, basically the manga is really well drawn because Yusuke Murata has an incredible style. There was actually one piece of trivia that I wanted to share with you, Jack, that I thought you might be interested in. Apparently, when Yusuke Murata was 12, he entered a contest to design Mega Man bosses and won twice. he designed
two?
he designed two bosses, one in Mega Man 4 and one in Mega Man 5.
that's really cool, actually.
He designed Dust Man from Mega Man 4
Okay.
and Crystal Man from Mega Man 5.
Oh, that's really cool.
And it's crazy to think that he did that when he was 12.
Yeah, have you ever just thought about people who are more talented than you and you're like,
Yeah,
I may not be old, but I'm too old to catch up with
been active
that.
in manga for a while. So, because like
Good on him.
he like published his first one-offs in like the 90s. But he like literally the only way I could describe the One Punch Man manga is like cinematic. Like the Berserk manga is really well drawn, but like it has like this specific feel to it, but like just the polish in One Punch Man is like absurd. Like I have no idea how they do it. I'm sure it's a bunch of editors who like help him draw it. But like there's just like these crazy sweeping like 2-page panels that are just like impeccably drawn. Like they just look like a like CGI screenshot from a movie. I don't know. Yeah,
But
anyway.
good CGI.
Yeah, like really good.
Because I feel like we need to specify.
Yeah, like cosmic, like full planet shots. Like I'm like, how did? Yeah, I don't know. So starting from the final arc of the story, or final arc of this season, we get introduced. We basically like get introduced to all of the other S-class heroes for the first time. They all get summoned to the Hero Association headquarters because apparently the like fortune teller of the Hero Association just died because she choked on a cough drop, and her last fortune was that the world was in danger. New one, I guess, because the world seems to always be in danger in this world.
Right? Like, how is that a fortune in this universe?
And then, oh my god, it just so happens that this giant spaceship shows up this day that all the S-Class heroes are together.
It's worth noting that Saitama is also there, not because he's an S-ranked hero, although he did get promoted to B rank after defeating the Deep Sea King, which he accepted largely just so that he doesn't have to do his C rank quotas anymore. Like, we get to watch his like rank up interview panel, and he's like, oh, does this mean I don't have any more quotas? If so, yeah, sure, why not? But yeah, Saitama's there not because he was actually invited, but because he was hanging out with Gino and Silverfang, and Silverfang's like, yeah, come on, dude.
Yeah, I love how like they just let him in. Like all of the other S-Class heroes are kind of like, wait, why is this guy here? But like none of the Hero Association higher ups are like, yeah, you have to leave. They're just like, okay, and he's just like sitting at the head of the table.
Yeah,
I don't know. I just love that. And I do love that like with this final little bit, it kind of deters away from like Saitama showing up at the end. Like Saitama just books it right towards the ship.
Yeah, he's the one who starts like doing stuff.
And so they're all like, "Oh my god, what do we have to do?" And then Genos is like, "Master, should we do something?" And then he's just gone, and there's a hole in the ceiling.
Yeah, they go on about how the Hero Association's HQ is built by Metal King.
Metal Knight, yeah.
Built by Metal Knight, who's the guy who sent the drone against the meteor, and about how that means that it's like the most fortified thing in the world. It's going to take so much time for us to go outside to figure out what's happening because of how secure this building is. And Saitama just jumps and is on the roof, and there's a hole that the other heroes follow him through. What I will say, what I appreciate about this scene the most, is that it introduces us to the strongest of the Tank Top family.
Oh yeah, fucking Tank
I forget his name.
Tank Top Master, dude.
Yeah, Tank Top Master.
Dude, there's a whole group of Tank Top people. He has like a whole like entourage of different Tank Top heroes.
I love that for him.
I think like, oh, gosh, one of them was like really funny to me. I don't know, I don't remember, but yeah, so everyone like follows up there, and then Saitama just like leaps at the spaceship, and they just like shoot a bombardment of like giant casings, and Saitama just like kicks one. He's like, time to go back. Like think about the amount of force he would have to use in order to stop that thing. Well, he's not even necessarily moving that fast, but he's just in midair, and he just reverses this thing full on, just like right back at. No, I know it doesn't matter.
The things that I've seen this man do up to this point, I didn't even think about this one, because this one's within the realms of normal shonen.
It's literally pointless. I just thought it was funny. And then Saitama just goes on a rampage, just like blowing up bits of the ship just from the inside out.
Yeah, he's just like making his way through the ship, kicking alien ass, and just like destroying things along the way. And there's a point where like the second in command alien is like, how do we get this guy out of here? And so like he like hops on the intercom to like try to like scare him out with like threats and stuff. And he's like, hey man, I couldn't leave if I wanted to. I am so lost right now. And he goes, oh, in that case, I'll show you the way out. So go ahead and take a right here. And he goes, oh, so that means I'll take a left. And he gets like his like serious, scary face for a second. Yeah, and the alien goes, oh no!
That's a good moment.
It's
And then,
pretty
but I
solid.
also love how he like goes to talk to Boros, who's like the captain of this ship, and and Boros is like, just send like our three strongest people after him, and he's like, well, he already took out one of our strongest people, and our other strongest guy is down on the surface fighting a bunch of other S-class heroes.
Which is a really cool, like, obviously Saitama is in a league of his own, so there really is no scale upon which you can place him relative to like the other heroes. But if you could, it's really cool to see that Saitama takes out two of the strongest aliens, and in fact the leader of the aliens. That's not a spoiler alert. He's the main character by himself in the time that it takes like the rest, like 6 S-class heroes to defeat one of them. Also, to show you how much of an asshole the S-ranked heroes are, is once like they start like figuring out what's happening, to explain why like the other 10 that they didn't want to animate helping aren't there. When we cut back to like outside of the ship, one of the characters goes, "Oh yeah, it looked like we have it under control," so the rest of them left.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, most of them are still there by the end, but I don't know what the hell they were doing. They were like we get introduced to Child Emperor,
The child prodigy.
He's literally just like he's like the number 5 hero, but he's just like hyper intelligent.
He's made like Doc Ock legs, and he's like barely out of kindergarten.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't do anything in this. He becomes more relevant down the line, but
he's really just an exposition point at this point.
Dude, there is one character that I think you would just absolutely love. King. You don't like get to see him do anything here, but like he's such a good character.
King, the world's strongest man?
Yeah.
Who looks like he just straight walked out of Fist of the North Star? Yeah, I already love him. Look at him.
But you don't even know his gimmick.
That's fair. He's the world's strongest man. I don't need to know more about his gimmick, dude.
I don't know, you do.
As long as he can choke slam someone through the steel cage at Hell in a Cell, like, that's kind of the vibe.
Do you want me to tell you? Because we can just be like, hard spoiler. If you don't want to hear this, don't listen to this. Because I just want you to know.
Hard spoiler.
He's not actually strong.
No!
He literally can't do anything. His whole gimmick...
My boy!
His whole gimmick is that he gets so terrified whenever he's facing a monster that his heart beats so loud that they get terrified. Because it just sounds like this giant, like, engine. Like, it just, like, sounds like thumping. So anytime anyone hears that, they're like, oh my god, the King engine. He's gonna murder me. It's like, that's literally his whole thing. And it's literally all played for laughs.
And that's an S-class hero, you're telling me?
Yeah, so like literally no one knows this. Saitama actually is the only person that learns this later on. And like they become like best friends.
Alright, that's pretty solid.
Yeah, no, it's super good.
So anyway.
So you can start listening again now. I don't know, we can cut that out if we want. But.
So the long and the short of it is these aliens appeared out of nowhere and just bombed all of City Z. It's gone. 100% gonzo. The heroes that stick around to help are Atomic Samurai, which makes him sound like he'd look so much cooler than he does. He's just a samurai with like a pretty generic Atom insignia on the back of his cape. His apprentice, which is an A-ranked hero, which is also a katana boy, but he's wearing European-styled armor, which was a weird non sequitur. Metal Bat, whom I love. He is the platonic ideal of, like, a loves his mother, good-natured delinquent, like a Yusuke Urameshi type character, except done well. Because he doesn't have to be the main character, so he actually gets to like have a personality. He does use a little bit of homophobic language when referring to Puri Puri prisoner, but it's not like aggressively. He calls him a pansy, which, like, you know, like in the grand scheme of things, like especially in like now, I don't think many people would think about it. But you know, historically, that's not been a great word. But also, it's Puri Puri prisoner who's a rapist, so I don't give a shit. Silverfang gets to go hard in this one.
Oh, yeah, dude.
And then there's somebody else who helps, isn't there?
It's Puri Puri Prisoner.
Oh, it's Puri Puri Prisoner.
Yeah.
Who's naked again? Don't you worry about that.
But he gets his Dark Angel transformation this time. I know, it's just pointless.
Yeah, it's pretty pointless.
Yeah, Metal Bat's hardcore, one of my favorite S-Class heroes.
Him. Oh, also, Tornado shows up. Tornado's been introduced before in this series up to this point.
I guess this is the time to talk about Tornado.
This is Jack's second soapbox of the episode. Although this one's going to be much shorter. In short, Tornado either deserves pants or to be depicted as 28, which she canonically is. As Forrest was showing me earlier, in the manga and in the webcomic, or I guess not the manga, in the webcomic, the original source, she's very much like already the chibi mascot character. She's drawn kind of silly, and she's not at all sexualized. In the manga, because it's a separate artist, she's egregiously sexualized, which would just be annoying if it wasn't for the fact that there are multiple moments where they canonically go off about how people mistake her as a child. She's a child. She's lolly bait, but that's still mostly lolly as far as it's lolly enough to make me go. So she either deserves pants or she deserves to be drawn as 28, which is to say, I don't like lolly bait as a character. She's not great, so she doesn't deserve much of anything as far as the way of like screen time's concerned. But big yikes, my dog.
Yeah, she just kind of shows up to be annoying, and she just freaks out at Saitama a couple times. And those are kind of funny moments. I do like those moments where she's like yelling at Saitama, and he's just like, "Who are you?"
Man, looking over and seeing my sound wave, I peaked hard.
Yeah. But basically, like, yeah, that group fight this guy down on the surface who can like regenerate. The Atomic Samurai's apprentice is like, we gotta like retreat and figure out how we can beat this guy. But they're all just like, that's not our style. We're just gonna keep doing this, and then
and it works, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, I mean, they learn that, like, there's these orbs that they can, like, destroy that are, like, its cores, and then it dies. I mean, that fight's just cool because of the visuals more than anything. I do love how Silverfang gets slammed really hard against a wall, and then he, like, stands back up, and he's like, oh, yeah, that, like, really loosened my shoulder.
Yeah. Oh, I need to do more full-body workouts.
Yeah, I mean, he's just badass all the way around.
Yeah, it's sort of a moment of poking fun at this. This is one of those loving parody moments where it's like, yeah, on the one hand, it is parodying wow, this shouldn't be working. Like, we've shown that brute force isn't working. They should stop doing brute force. But this is shonen, so brute force is going to work moments. And it is done in such a way where it's like, yeah, they probably should have been smarter about this. But because this really, when it's all said and done, is also a love letter to shonen, it does work.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the fights in this show work really well because they don't, like, take forever, you know? It's like, that's the biggest problem with every shonen fight. It's just, like, you can write fights that are time efficient and also well done. You don't have to stretch a fight over, like, 50 chapters.
Well, one of the things that I think works well for this show is that it doesn't try to give you plot progression while the fight is happening, so you can really focus on just the fight. And also, a lot of reason, or in my opinion, the reason why a lot of shonen fights drag on is because you need to have that transition from the villain being credible, so the villain beating the crap out of the hero, to the hero coming back, to the hero then finding a way to win. This show, baked into the premise, already has how the hero wins, so it doesn't have to waste any of that time. So what it can do is just do a lot of all of the really interesting fight sequences that they wanted to do, they can do immediately, and as soon as they've drawn that, they end it, right? And I think that's why it works so well, because it's just there for the visual spectacle, because the fighting isn't to the point we know what's going to happen.
Well, and I think that's another one of my favorite aspects about the show is that we get to see characters like Genos, have those fights where, like, you feel like the stakes are really there and he can't win. But it's, like, fine because, I mean, like, we know that Saitama's going to show up. But it's, like, I think I mean, for me personally, like obviously not, it probably isn't the case for everyone. I just feel like it balances that well, you know, because like it does work because you already know how it's gonna end. Like maybe that's just why shonen fights suck half the time, because they have to like raise the stakes. They have to make the hero come back from the brink of death every time.
But that's not. But like that half of the fight, we don't have to sit through because
Yeah, exactly.
we've already see it. But at the same time, we still get like the epic conclusion because the way that they draw Saitama going in for that one punch is very beautiful. So anyway, in the time that it takes those as class heroes to kill the dude on the ground, Saitama has made his way through the ship up to and including the leader. Brief aside on the leader, it's not too much anything special. The fight is gorgeous. Absolutely. Like, it is a season finale fight, and oh my god, in a show that's all about the spectacle, they really pull out all the stops. It's amazing.
And it's just like, I mean, it's also kind of played for laughs because like the whole time this guy's like, I have come here and I am the strongest in the universe, and there is a prophecy that I would find someone that's stronger than me on this planet, so I am here now. And Saitama's just like, okay.
Okay.
And then
He
they
hits
fight.
his install super and goes Super Saiyan, and then punts Saitama onto the moon, which is pretty much the only part about this fight that we can describe because the rest of it's just like motion and impacts and geometry.
Yeah,
He
it's just a
punts
lot of
Saitama onto the moon, who then immediately realizes that he can't breathe, so he plugs his nose, picks up like a moon rock and tosses it a few times and goes like, okay, with it. And like a really cool bit of sound design, all noise cuts out while he's on the moon.
No,
like
that's a
there
good
is no
moment.
backing track, there is no like anything else. And so it like for a second I legitimately thought that like my headphones broke, and I'm like, oh wait, they're doing a thing. It's a very cool moment. And then he's like, okay, cool, with this gravity I can totally jump back to Earth. And then he, as he does that jump, we hear like kind of like how Star Wars did like their like torpedoes as like a very muted explosion. We get like a muted explosion, which is the only sound that we've heard for like 30 seconds, and it's like okay, well done.
And then he like leaves like a giant crater on the moon, and then like slams back down onto the ship, and he's like, I made it. And then like the whole ship is just like tilting from the force of him landing on it. And then they like go at it. Like that's basically the final bout, because then like Boros is like, oh, I just gotta step it up. And I think it's like at this point where Boros is like, oh, I feel like I finally found the match. And then Saitama is like, well, if you're going to use your final move, I'm going to use my final killer move, Serious Punch.
Yeah.
I love how his whole like actual set of moves is literally just called Serious Series.
Yeah, he does this thing where, so like when they initially meet up, when Saitama's just done listening to the monologue, he just gives him a punch, and he goes, and at that point you think that it's over. And then like he stands up from like this collapsed pillar and goes, now that the armor that's been limiting my uncomprehendable power has been destroyed,
Well, that's like
our fight can begin.
Yeah.
And so technically this guy's taken quite a few punches, because he took that one and then Saitama hit him with the consecutive normal punches.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of this fight, is it's like, oh yeah, there are people that can withstand Saitama out there.
Assuming he's not taking it seriously.
Yeah, exactly. So like, yeah, so dude, I just love that shot at the end when like they do that final move, and there's just, it like zooms out on Earth, and there's just this swath, just like this giant V that like extends across the entire planet from where Saitama fucking left a punch.
All cloud coverage in the direction of Saitama's punch is just
And like
gone.
like that's the stuff that the manga does really well. Like that stuff just looks so cool in the manga. But also, like, I don't think I even mentioned this, but Yusuke Murata, the author, actually did the storyboarding for this first season of the anime.
Oh, that's cool.
So like it's basically like one for one what the manga is. Like honestly, the manga just feels like the storyboard in a lot of ways. But yeah, I mean that's like basically the final bout, and like Saitama after Saitama punches this guy, he's just like basically like charred and just like laying on the ground, and he's like, wow, that was an incredible fight. And then he's like, and then Saitama, well, I think he says like, but you weren't even like putting in effort or something.
So at the end of the fight, Boros, I'm making so many clacky noises. At the end of the fight, at the end of the at the end of the fight, Boros basically goes, "Oh, what a fight! Oh my god!" And then Saitama's just sort of standing up and like, "Yeah, that was a good fight." And then Boros basically goes, "Don't you lie to me?
Yeah.
I can tell you weren't even using a fraction of your power." Yeah. And so like it's kind of one of those moments where, kind of like Askeladd from last week, like, wow, Saitama's not enough of an asshole that he's willing to lie to somebody on their deathbed to make them feel better.
Yeah. And then Saitama just like, after the ship like crashes, after that, Saitama just like bursts his way out of the wall, and then Genos walks up and is like, "Oh, Master, you did it." Yeah. And then like Tornado shows up and is like, "What the hell happened in there?" And then Saitama is just like, "Genos, say something." And then Genos is like, "Shut up, you brat." And then she just like slams him against the wall.
Yeah.
I did really like that moment, because then Saitama like walks up and he like tries to pull him out, and he just like rips an arm off. And he's like, "Oh, that's your arm. I'm sorry."
Yeah. And so the season 1 concludes with some of the remaining aliens being like taken, like they're all roped together in like the We Have Lost way, and a Amai mask basically scrolls up and he's like, "Wow, you S rank heroes suck ass." And Metal Bat's like, "Hey, don't you at me. I'm not gonna sit here and get like talked down to by some pretty boy who cares more about his movie and pop career than being a hero." And Amai Mask basically goes, "You do know why I stay the number 1 A ranked hero? It is so that I can make sure people who do not deserve to be S rank never make it to S rank." Something protecting the image of heroes. He walks over, he just executes the prisoners.
Yeah.
And then he just goes off about how, like, yeah, all of you guys suck because look at this. Yeah, you won, but this city's decimated. Yeah. Devastated, rather. Because decimated would be exactly 1/10 of it being lost. And that's not even kind of true.
Which, I mean, it's a good point. Amai Mask is like kind of a meh character in my opinion, but
Amai Mask is kind of a nothing character, but this is like kind of what I was saying earlier, where if this world had the like My Hero Aka style, like, yeah, this is your I can rescue people from a collapsing building exam, none of these heroes would score points on it because none of them are good at the non-violent part of being a hero. And that's basically the point that Amai Mask raises here. But he's like being framed in such a way that's like the like very like stereotypical anime, "oh, this dude's a villain" type way. And it's like, okay, but why? He's making some pretty good points. Yeah, and then the last scene is some big old monster is monologuing, and Genos saves a kid, and the kid asks, "Who are you?" And Genos goes, "Just somebody who's a hero for fun and profit," as Saitama is punching through the chest of the big monster.
This giant pig monster. And then he's like, "I'm back to 1 punch."
I don't think he says that, but okay.
No, he does.
Does he?
He literally like holds his fist, and he's like, "God damn it, I'm back to 1 punch again."
Oh, I didn't. Did he?
Yeah, I'm pretty certain that's exactly what he says.
Huh.
And then a new ending, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's quite the ride.
The season definitely feels like it's been set up to explore things. Like, most of the season feels, and this is largely why I didn't put it on why I don't say add it to your list. Like, most of the season is setting things up, but it's not setting things up in a particularly interesting way. But again, it's visually gorgeous, and the fights are really good fights. So, like,
yeah,
if that's your vibe.
I mean, this whole series is kind of just banking on the fact that, like, you care about seeing Saitama do things. And it's like, I do enjoy Saitama as a character, and I do genuinely enjoy the way that, like, the other characters are treated and stuff. You get to see them all shine in their own way, especially later on, and I've like read most of the manga. I haven't read the webcomic though. I really want to, because the webcomic is actually ahead of the current manga.
Does Puri Puri Prisoner stop being relevant? Or do I have to put up with him if I decide to read the manga?
Yeah, he's actually not that relevant.
Oh, thank Christ.
Yeah, I mean, like, he kind of just, like, comes and goes. He's not, like, super, super relevant. But, yeah. Is there any other thoughts you wanted to add?
No, you got any last remarks? No. About the show? Okie dokie. Well, in that case, hey, Forrest, I don't use social media because I'm bad at it. But you have some cool things that you do.
Yeah, I make music under the moniker Bustello. Bustello. You can find me on YouTube. That's where I post most regularly. Bandcamp and Spotify too. I've got a second project called Prism Ship, like Prism, Prism. Yeah, just electronic synth music. I try to step out of my comfort zone here and there, but yeah, thanks for listening.
Almost certainly links in the description below.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, goodbye.